To start, I'd like to acknowledge the lands on which I virtually join you from, the lands of the Jagera, Yuggera and Yuggera peoples of what is known as the Ipswich region of southeast Queensland. I'd like to acknowledge their elders past and present and also pay my respects to the place where I live and work. I'm Rhianna from the IndigenousX team, and I'm a little bit excited about this horror anthology. I've been waiting for it for a while, and there is a reason behind that, and it's because of the two authors who are joining me right now. But Hometown Haunts is a new young adult horror anthology from Wakefield Press, and it does contain the stories from Indigenous authors Lisa Fuller and Jared Thomas. Jared, can you please tell me the lands on which you are joining me from, who you are, and the name of your story which appears in this book?
Yeah, hi Rhianna. I'm coming to you from Miona country, Ghana country in Adelaide. So I'm down at Aldinga Beach in Ghana country. I'm a Nukuna person from the Southern Flinders Ranges. And the name of my story in Hometown Haunts, name of my story is Seek and Destroy, named after the Metallica song.
And we'll get to that too when we chat about that song, Jared. Lisa, can you tell me on the lands on which you're joining us from, who you are and the name of your story which appears in Hometown Haunts?
I'm joining you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country here in Canberra. I'm a Willy woman, also descended from Waka Waka and Gurungurung peoples from Iswold in southeast Queensland. And my short story is called Don't Look.
Lisa, you know, I wanted to know from both of you. I mean, I grew up hearing stories, I guess, about the unexplained, about the things that you shouldn't do pretty much at night. And I wanted to know, Lisa, I mean, were these the stories that you grew up listening to in your house as well?
100%. I think the scary stories are some of the most favorite and most terrifying nights of my life.
Jared, was it the same in your house, having stories like this?
Yeah, I'm a deeply superstitious religious person in terms of our culture, and there's a lot of stories that are shared just about what you can do, what you can't, where you can go, where you can't go, different times of the day when certain things are appropriate or inappropriate. So so some of that was I haven't, through my story, I haven't told this. It's not like I'm telling the scariest story that I know. It's just one of the stories. But there's a lot of that with family, friends, sitting down and just scaring the bejesus out of each other.
It's the only way to do it, though, isn't it, Jared?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about the both of you, but I love that. I love when someone just breaks out with a yarn like this and you just sit there going, no. So, Jared, what was the genesis, I guess, for Seek and Destroy?
Well, I think it was, I was approached by Wakefield Press to produce a piece for the anthology, and I haven't really written in horror, so I started to think, what are some of the stories I know and what would be a story of value? So in part, this is a bit of a pastiche of different stories. So that whole thing about kids camping and scaring the shit out of each other, that was actually happening. I remember that when I was on a grade 4 camp out in the northern Flinders Ranges, Aladimatha country, Rawdsley Park, and this fella just scaring the shit out of us, talking about different figures. And so then there's the reference to a fella called Georgie Barnes, and Georgie Barnes is again, some of my Adimatha neighbours would say to their kids, if you don't go to bed, if you don't be quiet, Georgie Barnes is going to come. So there was always this idea of Georgie Barnes, who becomes one of the characters in the book. And then just thinking, like, what do I want to do through this story? And I wanted non-Aboriginal people to understand more about our beliefs around ancestors and the deceased, and the respect that we have, and what can go wrong. So really, it's a horror story directed at, I think, non-Aboriginal people. I think Aboriginal readers will really enjoy it because our sentiments, our principles are reflected through the story. Um, I don't know. I think like Rhianna, we had some early conversation and you were just like, yep, I know what's going to happen here. And you can kind of see it all unfolded from an Aboriginal perspective. Yeah, so yeah, I'm just really interested to see how it's how people respond. The other thing with the impetus, like for me, like during the 80s and the 90s, so there was a lot of metal, a lot of death metal, and a lot of horror. It was all your kind of Friday the 13th and Freddy Krueger and stuff, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So just for me, that kind of inclusion of metal was really important. And then yeah, that particular song, Seek and Destroy off the album Kill 'Em All, right? So for me, you know, some of my other works like Sweet Guy, Calypso Summer, Songs That Sound Like Blood, they're all kind of music driven books. There's always a set of songs or a song that kind of helps to drive the narrative. And so again, I went, well, what is the metal song that I'm going to set this book around? And you know, the lyrics within Metallica's Seek and Destroy are kind of perfect in terms of someone, you know, running, hiding, while someone's, you know, just coming after them, bound to, you know, just set on completely destroying them.
But also knowing what album that comes from, kind of, whoops, spoiler alert if you know the album. So you kind of know maybe what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lisa, I mean, for you, look, you know, if anyone's read Ghostbird, they know that you can tell some pretty scary yarns, but you know, where did Don't Look come from? I mean, is that set also back, you know, Eidsvold country?
Yeah, it's actually loosely based on something that happened to me. So it was literally one of the most terrifying nights of my life. But it's funny you say that about, like, you know, Ghostbird, because I didn't really see Ghostbird as being horror. And I think partly it's because of those stories we grow up with. You know, it's not really classified, and I don't think of it like that. It's just sitting around yarning and scaring the absolute shit out of each other.
Yeah, but it's probably more a spooky read, isn't it? It's, you know,
yeah.
Ghostbird is a spooky read. It's a, you know, it's a bit of mystery in there as well. But I guess, you know, do you call, and this again comes back to everything that has been spoken about Ghostbird, that you've written about, that you've talked about yeah, are our stories and the stories that you tell like that, and what you tell in Don't Look as well. It's not necessarily horror as we would frame it as Indigenous people. They're just yarns that are part of who we are and the stories that we grow up hearing and the things that we understand about the things that we can't see.
Yeah, so it was weird when Poppy got in touch with me to contribute, but I mean, hugely flattering, and I kind of got excited by the idea. And I have had the chance to speak on a horror panel, and I think it's just kind of opened my eyes to the idea that horror and even things like crime and those genres, they're huge umbrella terms, and there's all sorts of different ways to approach it. And what's interesting about horror is, more often than not, it's really exploring some sort of deep emotional trauma, or something's, you know, very wrong at a very personal level. It's not just about, you know, the horrifying creature, although it can be, and that can be fun as well. But yeah, so Don't Look actually came about because I'd been through exactly that, in that my cousin, you know, we were living in Toowoomba at the time, but we were spending the school holidays back home in Eidsvold, and my cousin, all of her brothers and sisters, you know, they'd taken off to other aunties and uncles and gone, you know, to Ipswich and Fernvale, and, you know, they were having their school holidays elsewhere, and she was alone in the house. And she got onto me and she's like, Cuz, you know, come, you know, sleep over, spend the night with me. And I'm like, yeah, sure, no worries. And, you know, we were supposed to just chill out, and this house, the second the sun went down, it just felt wrong. And I can't even explain it, but I was terrified. And then things started to go wrong. And like, I shortened it a lot for this story, and I made a lot of changes. So like I said, it's loosely based, but yeah, literally I stayed there until the sun came up. And everybody who knows me knows I'm not a morning person. was up and out that door so fast, and I did not go back in that house ever again. And she told me later that she knew, but she was too scared to stay in the house by herself. She set me up.
What kind of cousin? What kind of cousin is that? What kind of cousin is that?
So yeah, I never trusted her again.
Nah, and I don't blame you. I don't blame you. That's not a good cousin. Cousin needs to do better.
Oh, she was scared too. She was older than me. She was scared too. So, you know, in some ways I understand it, but I flat out told her I'm never, ever sleeping at your house ever again.
Oh my gosh. Jared, well, we've heard a little bit about what Don't Look is about. I mean, Jared, can you go into a little bit more about what Seek and Destroy is about and the story that you've written as part of this anthology?
Yeah, so, well, basically it follows the story of Bradley, who's like a young bloke working in an apprentice working in an engineering firm, and he's out on some site development one day, and there's some Aboriginal people monitoring the site, and they've just gone for a walk down the creek, and there's some bones that are uncovered during the excavation, and then there's his boss arrives, and they have a debate about whether to present the bones to the Aboriginal people that are doing the monitoring or to keep it a secret. And they decide to dig another hole and to bury those ancestral remains. And then things start to get a little bit interesting for Bradley and associates. And yeah, I guess, you know, these are issues that my family are dealing with all the time. And sometimes with our burial sites, when things become uncovered and recovering, and the type of how we feel about those areas, and how we feel about the disruption of sacred areas and particularly burial sites. The other thing through this story is I just wanted to talk about just the fragility of landscape as well. Like, I think, you know, when there's events, horrific events, and, you know, our people have lived through the apocalypse, you know, that's been ongoing for our people. You look at an apocalyptic story, a film on Netflix or at the cinema or whatever, it's basically all of those things that are presented as the dreadful things, the worst things that could happen to people, that have happened to our people. So when we look at, so the environment, and how when bad events happen, the land makes you pay, the country makes you pay. So this is what this book is, this story is really about. It's the country is getting paid back.
I guess it's also, you know, the deeper underlying part to, I think, the story that I took from it too, was that it is the horror about the desecration of country. You know, the horror that we have seen of sites being destroyed, of companies not caring in what they're doing. And I think, you know, as you said, Jared, I did automatically know as soon as what was happening at the start of that story was about to happen. I was well, it's going to be unleashed, like it's happening. And so, you know, as you go through this story, not surprised by any of it. And there were some great bits in it. And I guess that last part for me was the part where I was like, no, but what happens? You know, and his granddad telling Bradley, you know, what he needs to do because of what's been happening, because of what has happened earlier in this story, because I don't want to give too much away. But then I just wanted more, and I was left, and I know Lisa's like, that's the point of a short story. And you're left on that precipice and you're left hanging. But I was just like, please let there be more at some point somewhere, sometime, because I want to see what happens.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing, you know, when I'm writing a novel, short story, or anything, like, I am always thinking about the story visually. Like, and I would, you know, I'd love to see some of my stories adapted to film or television. So when I was writing this, it was with a short film in mind, or to create a strong set of characters to look at the telling of a bigger story. So yeah, I feel with this now I could expand it, and just looking at that issue of violence. So amongst the Aboriginal community that's portrayed, you have some people that are really for the mining development to go ahead, and you have people that are really against. And that always happens. So there is this violence that occurs within our own communities. And those that are against mining believe that they're completely doing the same thing, the right thing, and so do those on the other side. So, there's a bigger kind of narrative to be explored if I wanted to take it in that direction. But
and you do touch on that as part of this story too. You do touch on those both those sides that you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, it is a horror. It's a short horror story with some very deep issues.
Lisa, are you the same with Jared, that when you're writing, particularly something that's shorter, are you always thinking about, is it the visual for you? I mean, I know you said this is loosely based, so you've obviously experienced parts of this story as well. But when you are, writing something that is like this, is the visual what drives you?
I think, yeah, definitely, because I can relate to that idea of what Jared was saying about, picturing in your head. But I also, it took me a long time to really get a handle around what show versus just show don't tell means. And to me, it's like I climb inside the skin of my character, which wasn't so hard with this one. And, I'm looking for the sensations and the textures, but also the visual, because, I'm one of these people. I really love character-driven. I love story-driven stuff, and I think things that find their way in subtly is far more important than, well, not important, but impactful. But subtly, not in your face. I'm trying to. How do I phrase this? It's not preaching. It's just, it is what it is, and this is what's happening, and it's hinting at things underneath. So, like,
it's the subtlety, because you've got some of those subtleties in your work too. In this
the
story.
House where the girls go is, and this happens a lot. I'm told in country towns. It definitely happened in mine, where the old hospital got chopped up, and different wards went to different parts of the town, and it got turned into houses, and everybody in town knows where those places are. But I'd been in Toowoomba for 5 years and I didn't know, and my cousin took advantage of that. That belief that where bad things happen, things stick, and you get haunted by stuff, and you can't just look the other way.
And I mean, I liked that in your story too, where, look, whenever there's a ball that comes out of nowhere and it's not obvious who did it, I'm out. Like, don't go back into that house. Keep walking. Let the ball roll where it wants to roll, but don't hang around to see what happens next. But I kind of like the build that you had in this story too, because I mean, that's the skill with a short story, isn't it? That it's how you make those moments build, and how you build tension into that, and how you keep the reader reading, and whether that gets resolved or not. But you've got to think about how you do that in such a short amount of time, in a way.
Yeah, this is kind of only my second attempt at a short story. And I know everyone says, writers, you should start with the shorter stuff, but it's just never worked for me. I think my head just operates in bigger narratives, and I'll try to start a short story, but it ends up being like, everyone who reads my short story before this was like, yeah, the opening chapter of a good book. I'm like, oh, no, not again. So this was kind of the first time. Well, I've had one short story published before this. So this is only the second time I really feel like I came up with a narrative that, actually was encompassed by a short story.
Jared, did you struggle? Did you have similar struggles like Lisa in kind of reining it in a little bit? And
not really. I enjoy writing a short story. Before I moved over to writing long form fiction, I had that because I was terrified by the prospect of writing long form fiction. And I thought, it's like, I've got to lift lighter weights before I can lift the heavier ones. So for me, the short story was all about, building my muscle to be able to take on the writing of a big novel, and, sustaining, a good, strong story, and dialogue and character development and all those things. So, I guess for me, once I kind of knew what the story was about, I could plot it out and then go for it, and try to really refine it. So something that I go for a lot these days is, just really trying to work out the craft in my writing. And for me, a lot of that is about the tension that is maintained within every sentence, within every scene, so it all kind of hangs together. So I know when we were talking earlier, you said you get to this final scene, and then it's like all of these threads of the story just come into that room and can be understood by, what is happening in that room. So that room is only featured for it's probably only 3 to 4 paragraphs.
It's short.
It's short. So like, it's less than like 1/10 of the story. Yeah, but everything comes together in that moment. So so for me, working on a short story, it is about the real kind of execution of craft, character, set, backstory, to give this big kind of this big concluding moment.
Jared, you've already said that this is going to be something that we hopefully see in the future, that it's a longer story, and that you hope to do something that's a bit longer. And I guess, I mean, I can't wait to read that, to be honest, because I have just, the penny has just dropped about something else that happens in that story as you were just talking. And I'm now like, oh, this is so much deeper than I thought. I'm still, and this is the thing. I guess that's what makes a great short story, is you're still thinking about it after you finish reading it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got me thinking as well, because like, I probably, at the time until we spoke this morning, I just thought, here's a short story. I was hoping, one of our great Aboriginal directors, producers, like, Ivan San or Warwick or someone really
just
deadly.
No names, just a feeling, just a couple that you thought,
just wants to pick it up and go, yep, I'm going to work on this, or, an up and coming Aboriginal director. And then how I could add to it. But I guess, like, there are so many directions this story can now take. And when we think about, so it's really interesting, like with, I don't know about you fellas, but in my culture, when someone dies, and you're wanting them to pass on, right? So in my culture, we have an equivalent of heaven. So we want our people to go to that place. But sometimes thinking about, if someone has passed away, their ability to see into you and to see if you're virtuous or not. And similarly, we have we have spirits in our culture that do that as well. So then there's particular concentrations of them on country. So they have the ability to make us healthy, but they also have the ability to make us sick if we've been acting in a really unethical way. So there's other directions connected to my culture that particular story could take.
Lisa, have you thought about where this could go? Could it be longer?
I've got too many novel ideas right now. To me, this is it. And I'm like, I was pretty happy. Like, I've got a single story that I don't want to expand, and I think I'm going to stay there.
Oh, I loved the description of heat in it as well. And I think it's because I've been having some quite hot days recently where, I think you've got one description of the sweat dribbling from someone's eyes. And I'm thinking, yep, that was the other day. Like it's going to be a hot one, I think. But yeah, I kind of liked a lot of those descriptions that added to that feeling. And in a way, I think you described the house at one point as this sort of suffocating heat that even though all the windows are open, there's something there that's not allowing even the air to flow through. And I really loved the way that you describe that, and you kind of bring that all together. And then, obviously they've got this, when they've got the sheet over their face and you're thinking, oh, gee, that's going to be hot. Like it's already a hot day. It's a hot night. There's nothing happening in this house. There's no air coming in. And then they've got this sheet over their head because of what's happening around them. So, Lisa, I suppose for you, I mean, what do you hope that that readers take away from your story, or what do you hope that they get out of reading this?
I think with all my writing, I just hope, first and foremost, they just find it a really good yarn and are entertained. But, if they learn a little bit about, the hidden histories and, I think the great thing about all of our stories, Blackfellas, when we tell stuff, there's always really, there's subtext. There's things that have gone on in the past that are still impacting us here in the future. And there's things that I hint to in the story about, quite a lot of grief and what's happening there. So I think hopefully, I think honestly the whole story for me is about grief. So hopefully people are able to see that context. I don't know, sometimes you wonder because what we might read into it will non-Indigenous people read into it, but at the same time I think I mostly write for my nieces and nephews, so I'm good as long as they get the point. Sorry, I wandered all over the shop then. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think you did. And I think you're right. I mean, I think there's that that bit at the end that I quite liked, without giving too much away, of where the grief that I guess sets the scene of the story and sort of what's going through this character's head is kind of, I think it's a nice touch for that bit. And it made a lot of sense to me too.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think it does come across.
Cool, because there's the part of you that wants to just, when Poppy approached me with this, I'm like, we've had so much fun, so many fun nights. And every Easter after we moved back home to Isvold, Mum would send me back to my aunties and uncles in Toowoomba, and I'd usually babysit them for a couple of nights. And it's 4 boys, and every single time the second all the adults left the house, Lise, tell us a ghost story. I'm like, no, because I'm not getting in trouble again, and I'm sick of this. And then I'd spend the whole night completely terrifying them, and then their parents would come home, but they wouldn't tell them what we'd been doing. It was the first time I got in so much trouble. But just some of that stuff, it's really fun. But every time I think about those stories, it's fun, but there's also something underneath that they're trying to teach us something, like Jared said before, like how not to behave, and this is what you do and this is not what you do, and these are kind of the consequences. And
Jared, for you, what do you hope people take away, I guess, from a story which really is from a non-Indigenous perspective in a way?
Yeah. I guess that with a non-Indigenous perspective, I think it's more that it's character driven, and the central character is a non-Aboriginal person. So and that's because it's just a device to connect with particularly young non-Aboriginal readers, particularly young male non-Aboriginal readers. And so what I want people to take away, I guess it's like any of my work, with colonization has come the most tragic thing is the dehumanization of our people. And during early times of colonization, it was based on the premise that we have no humanity, we're uncivilized, we have no religion, etc. And so I think through this, it's about understanding of a cultural, spiritual position. It's I hope non-Aboriginal readers can come away and that it's another thing that they start to understand about us, is that we have some very strong religious principles and ideas that operate as strongly today as what they would have operated for you know, our great grandparents during the earliest stages of colonization.
Well, Jared and Lisa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And Hometown Haunts is out now, so please check it out along with the other works from Lisa Fuller and also Jared Thomas.